Welcome to part one of our holiday series, everyone. We got our intro out of the way last time, so if whether this is like the first time you're tuning in, you can always go back to that and get to learn a little bit about us. But today we're hoping to kind of provide some conversation around the end of the year, the holidays that come up. And before we dive a little too deep into things, I just want to go ahead and restate our disclaimer that this podcast is for informational purposes only and it doesn't constitute medical, nutritional, legal, or any type of professional advice. The content is not intended to replace professional advice, and it's recommended that you seek any advice from a qualified professional if you feel like you have any concerns that come up. Listener discretion is advised for younger listeners, and the views and opinions that are expressed are those of the hosts and the guests and do not reflect any employers, organizations, or sponsors. So now that we got that out the way, uh, we're coming back with part one of our holiday series. And so, as Latina clinicians, we're working in eating disorders. We kind of get to see firsthand, like, we know how complex this season can feel. Today, we're going to be going into taking it back to the roots. What are the origins of celebration, the foods that carry our history, and the joy and presence of those moments that were meant to hold these things for us? Before we dive in, we wanted to define a few terms that you'll hear mentioned throughout the series and in future episodes. So I'll just let Nico go over that with you all real quick.
Some baseline terms, just a few. One is a little bit of based on the history. The other two are going to be techniques that I know we're going to talk about near the end of what we can use to support ourselves during the holidays. So first is familismo. Essentially, it is a cultural value emphasizing loyalty, closeness, and deep connection with the family. Highlights the belief that the family's needs, unity, and well-being are often come in before the individuals at times, and that major life decisions need to involve the family. It's a big group mentality. It can be a source of strength and pressure at the same time, that duality there. And you all both can let me know if you have any thoughts on that too. I know we'll talk more about it. And then some of the techniques we talk a lot about is grounding. So strategies that help bring someone back into their body in the present moment. So especially when we're feeling overwhelmed or anxious or just disconnected, grounding can help us reconnect back to our senses, back to our bodies and selves in a calming nervous system way. And it helps with our emotion regulation. And then lastly, the other term is weight-centric. And that is more of a mindset approach that focuses heavily on the size of the body, weight, BMI, as indicators of health. I'm quoting health because, if you look at the intro, my rant about that. But anyways, it's focusing on weight as the source of health, and it can often fuel shame, restriction, body dissatisfaction. And so we will differentiate the weight-centric versus non-weight centered approaches on valuing health behaviors, emotional well-being, and such. So things that don't involve the body size, because we know health is not related to that at this point, both under our understandings. So that's a bit of some of the terms. I know we wanted to maybe start off a little bit with holidays and a bit of the history, why they exist. If you all want to start off with that.
Yeah, no, diving in, opening up to those origins. I think thinking back to like, where does this all start? Like, the first thing that comes up for me is how a lot of our celebrations come from a blend of, like, indigenous, African, Spanish influences from colonization, and food has always been at the a center of everything. Um, where we're just kind of like using that to be a means of survival and to keep memories alive and to bring people together. And I think the way that traditions have evolved to be more commercial and capitalistic, it's nice to strip them away from that and just think of, like, how is it that our communities reflected on surviving and getting through the year? How is it that we highlighted storytellers and made space for all of that, that we get so caught up in the year ignoring and we get to slow down for?
I really like that, Christina. I think also when I think of like the origins, kind of tapping into what you said, and I'm gonna read it off, is I think of like pre-colonial, right? Like what did that look like back then? And some of the things that I found which were really interesting is, really focusing on honoring ancestors, but also just kind of putting to focus, right, how much meaning there is behind celebrations and honoring, food. A lot of these tradition started off like as seasonal and like harvest cycles, right? Celebrations in that way. And then also just, rituals of gratitude, community, unity. So I think that's kind of where we see that like bridge of and intersection of like how these are like so related and just kind of how they're deep rooted. Even like pre-colonial, right? Back before westernization really kind of transferred it and made it to like the beast that it is now. um so that's definitely just kind of like some points that I really wanted to like highlight, right? Around that. Yeah.
Well put. Yeah, the beast that it is now. Because this is right. We get lost when we watch commercials. We're getting lost in the usual cycle routine that we're accustomed to now. And then we
Mhm.
can lose sight at times of like, wait, where did this all come from that really brought our families together, is involved with a lot of heavy foods, great foods. For some, there's music, there's spiritual events or, ceremonies. And then we lose sight of that, like the bigger picture. Yeah, I was going to say with food at that time, it's symbolic because it is a time when the winter, when depending where you live, of course, and the seasons are different depending on the location of the world. But if you have to harvest foods because the growth on the agriculture slows down because it's more darker times, winter times, we gather it. We all then celebrate together in one moment because then we're starting to approach when it starts becoming lighter out and more daylight. And this is near the end when winter solstice occurs. So yeah, it all puts that together. And I think with that congregation of people with eating, it equates that love and sense of community. And that's why I think now in our culture, we have that tie with food equating love at that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it
No,
definitely has changed.
It
yeah.
reminds me of like my childhood, right? I think of it in the good moments, right? I think food, and just how that much like love was shown through food, right? Um, and just, reflecting on like how those traditions, like even in our own, like my own family, how those have shifted, right? From like what they look like before and like kind of what they look like now. Um, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good segue because I think hearing y'all talk, I'm also thinking about like what did we grow up with individually, right? Like what
Mm,
traditions do we remember that at some point made us excited? It provided a lot of joy. It was this like thing to look forward to. And maybe over time as we began to look inward and educate ourselves more, it was like, ooh, this is not feeling as great. Like for me, I loved that the holidays meant a full house
mm,
because I grew up with just me and my sister, and I think like it's not uncommon for like a lot of Latino families to be very big, whether it's through like cousins or siblings. And my unit was just the three of us: my mom, my sister, and me. But the holidays was when I got to see all my cousins, all the tias, and it was like finally I get to be around so many people. Not that I didn't appreciate my sister, but over time I started getting stressed. Like, oh no, I have to be with these people. It was no longer I get to,
mm,
it was I have to because comments start piling up. And this joyous thing around food has become now something that's been policed or is being taught to me that has to be monitored. And I'm just like, is there an opt out? But at that age, you don't get to choose whether you go or don't.
mm,
Yes. I felt the same shift too. Similar. I mean, I have a few siblings, but it was just our family unit when we gathered. But I think being the oldest daughter and the one who helped out, that sense of responsibility grew and grew, and I started to kind of lose the fun side of it, of like the excitement, the food, the smells, because I was just so fixated on the next steps. What do we do? What do we do? And I think one of the things with my own kind of readings to see is this, if this is a common occurrence, is the blend or the pull between how do we feel, how are we incorporating still tradition that is enjoyable and ties us back to our roots, and balancing that with our sense of autonomy. Like, how do I take a break when I'm having to go and be busy with cooking, or hearing the comments if there are comments made? How do I balance that while still being present too? So I know we'll talk a bit about that, but I think I appreciate you sharing that, Christina, because that's very similar to mine too.
Mm. You know, a lot of like what you both said like resonates with just like my own experience, but I think just even how excited like I would get, like I know like Christmas Eve I was like, oh hell yeah, like we'd never make it to midnight. We always convince our aunts and uncles and our family like 10 p.m. is the latest, like we open all of our gifts. But just like the community again of just having like every cousin under the sun like in my house, that's when that joy was really there. And just being able to oh, like, this tia like made, X, Y, or Z kind of flavored tamales. I was like, oh, hell yeah, But then I think for myself, as slowly getting even into kind of like that, like prepubescent like age, like, certain cousins started not wanting to come, right? Because you're kind of going through like your own changes, and like those shifts and those celebrations started not feeling as nice. And then at least for my own experience, right, like my holidays look so different now, right? I don't see all of my cousins, so that joy is a little bit different. The food is not the same, right? Because that also has changed just with throughout, and just kind of even the dishes that we make, because certain people are not present, certain people would do dishes or make certain types of food, and that's not there anymore. So I think being able to recognize like when you could kind of like start reclaiming what you want it to be, and exactly what you want it to be is really kind of one of the things that I know we're going to get into later on too, but definitely a shift for myself.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think as those challenges become a little more present for us, I'm wondering like how have we navigated them within our own families, and how do we set these boundaries and expectations? Because I think that can create a lot of duality for us, right? Like boundaries can come off as harsh or selfish, but it's like we have to be able to reframe them as self-care and preservation and safety, because that's the way that it helps us still be able to participate. And I don't know if there are like specific things that come up for either of you that were strategies that you developed. Like, was there anything that comes to mind that helped you become more aware and in charge of those uncomfortable situations?
I don't think I learned of strategies or things I've done until I started to work in this field. And I was like, oh, in hindsight, that would have been helpful for me. Because I think now growing up, and kind of healing in my own ways, I'm more comfortable now with the foods that come through, and feel a little bit more freedom with it. But at that time, it was very difficult to set boundaries and not know what to do, and feel like obligated just to eat the amount past fullness, have that feeling of regret, and maybe if I had to act on it or not. But it was a very cyclical emotion during the holidays that I would start wanting to avoid. And then I moved far away. And then I think that was my boundary, was the physical boundary. And that kind of duality for me was bringing feelings of sadness, and feeling bad for missing out because I wouldn't join and see my family sometimes for holidays. So
Mhm.
I actually didn't have many, and that's where I wish I would have. This is why I know why we're here to share it. But yeah, how about you both?
Hmm. I definitely would say, Nico, like same, right? I know that unfortunately that stigma is like really heavily there, right? Where it's like even if we were to think of, our younger self setting boundaries, like I could just kind of imagine like what that would come across like for, certain family members, maybe not sitting well, or being seen as disrespectful, right? Or being seen as like you think like you're better than others, right? Because you're kind of setting this boundary. But I really do wish like I would have had that more in my foundation versus just kind of having to kind of be, complacent and like stay quiet or like go in secret and like drink my soda because I wasn't allowed to have soda. Like, and I was like, doing it in secret because like it was just like I felt shame, right? Um, and I was also very little. I was like around 8 or 9 when I remember doing that. So when you're that young, right, you're also not too in tuned with like what recognizing what is this emotion that you're feeling and what's going on. So that also kind of just created a lot of like unsafety or uncertainty around certain foods for myself. Um, as an adult, though, I think things kind of shifted for myself. And being able to feel empowered, right? Of being able to set those gentle boundaries, especially when it comes to comments. I mean, let's be honest, the holidays, like there's always going to be, certain family members around that like just don't know when to like not say things, and that censorship, could go a long way if we would just be willing and able to open ourselves up a little bit more to some of the, cultural things that we kind of do, right? Like giving each other like pet names based off of like our appearance or things like that. That sticks with you, those things stick with you even as you kind of go throughout your adult life.
Yeah, I agree. I guess none of us are alone in this. I didn't know what to do either. And I think instead I just ignored, dissociated, deflected,
Mhm.
and internalized. Like, I was just like, why is everybody else laughing? I must be the problem because I don't see what's funny, but their
Mm,
laughter was coming at my expense, right? And that's what everybody else was saying. Oh, stop taking it so serious. It's a joke. And I wish I could go back to little Christina and be like, it is not you, it is them, and you will learn later. But I think as we've all kind of been able to step into this work, it's when it's really allowed us to learn the compassionate boundaries and how to still function in our greater family units without having to compromise ourselves. Um, and with that, food being such a big thing culturally, like I think the other questions and thoughts that come up are like, how does somebody even honor their cultural foods while still listening to their body? How are we threading the line between being present, maybe going over because that allows us to still participate, and how to bring ourselves back afterwards so the shame doesn't win?
Yes. I would say with that, even just preparing for this conversation, this topic for all of us, I really lean towards looking back in time, like where did this all come from? So the origins and returning to the values, understanding the values behind our unique family traditions. We can generalize for our Latino population. We can then go further into our origins, where we're from, country wise, language, whatever. And I think that brings, at least for me, a sense of reconnection, and joy as well, with knowing, okay, this is where it comes from. That's right. This is why we're doing this. This is so fun. And so it reignites that child, I think that inner childlike happiness. Um, Learning storytelling, also recently just asking my own family, like, okay, with that one food, why don't we have it like that other food? Like, why do we make turkey still in Ecuador, in our family at least? Why don't we make the cuy or pernil, even though I really love those two too? Um, and so that kind of brought that interest of like, I don't know, yeah, maybe it came from so and so grandmother, and there's that one recipe. So I think storytelling and talking about food in that healthy way really has helped bring back the celebratory moments. I think with the actual eating, like I said, I think the mindset for me has helped, but I know for some, if the difficulty is not knowing what is the right amount, if it's the quantity or and such, then I know, I mean, that's where I know we'll chat a bit about techniques, but it's, I think feeling empowered to know what feels so comfortable for you and honoring, like, I'm really happy full. This is where I'll leave it. Or, hey, actually, I'm really hungry. I'm not going to just restrict because it doesn't look right. So I think that's also a big decision making And I think in hindsight, it would have been nice to have planned ahead of time because I know kind of what foods would come about, and then knowing like I'm excited for this food the most. Let's prioritize that on the biggest part of my plate or whatever. So I think with the actual eating piece, that could be helpful. And I guess that's something that I do already, anyways. Now that I think about it, I'm like, all right, we call them yapingachos. There's these delicious like potato patties with cheese in them. I'm like, I'm gonna save like a third of the plate for that, and whatever's left is left. So, yeah, yeah.
Love that.
That is so funny. When you mentioned turkey, it made me laugh inside because this past Thanksgiving, like, my family's from Mexico, my partner's family's from Puerto Rico, and we were both kind of like paused while we were like prepping things. We're like, why do we have turkey? Like, it's almost like we think there's gonna be a food police that comes to check the table. Do you have your turkey? It's like that thing like just has no relevance to either of us, and somehow it still makes it to the table every year.
Yeah.
And now it's like more of like, okay, we're trying to help accommodate people's dietary restrictions because some people can't have red meat or whatever the case is, and now we're just painting it as a nice alternative, but not something that we're stressing about. But yeah,
Yeah.
no, we'll see next year. But I think to what you're saying too, like eating, whether we're trying to like sense and figure out like how do we do this the quote unquote right way, it's really more so like how are we doing this to enjoy. I love that you said like I'm dedicating a third of my plate to this because I used to work backwards. Like I have to have the good stuff on there first, and then I can get the fun
Mm.
foods because everybody's watching me make my plate, and I don't want the comments. Well, why didn't you get that? Or why are you eating too much of that? And now it's just more of like, I think in my training where we're like we have to help guide people to intuitive eating. It's like that in itself I think has been very whitewashed, and like much of the wellness industry is like this works as the default for white populations. But how do we apply this to nuances of other minority cultures, because we do push food in every way. And if I'm teaching somebody, hey, like, get in touch with your hunger fullness cues, I would almost feel like a hypocrite to say you have to stick to these, knowing that this food event means we're maybe going to go past that.
Yeah.
And it's okay. And if we do go past it, how do we sit with that uncomfortable fullness?
Mm.
I visualize that as well, because someone who's been guiding me with my own healing journey she calls it more of like I'm feeding my soul. Like this is when I'm feeding my soul. My soul wants half the plate of yapping gachos and a lot of desserts, and that's fine. And so it's more of like, all right, there's a little uncomfortable, but that's because I like did something really fun and it was enjoyable. And feeding the body too. I mean, if you believe in the separation or unity of all parts of you, that I think that has helped me too to be like, that's right. This is like what I'm feeding myself, and this is what maybe we can put it as intuitive eating for my soul is saying too.
Mm. I like that. One of the things that I recently heard, and this was from one of my patients, and it really stuck with me, like it resonated a lot with me, she said, um, that such the westernization and diet culture has us working against our bodies instead of being in partnership with our bodies. And I was like, "Ooh,
Yes.
preach to the choir, girl," because that just it was so good. And it just makes me think of what you both are saying right now, right? How Christina, like same. I was like, oh my gosh, like this Dia's watching, I have to put like a lot of salad because then I'm gonna get oh, why are you getting double of, I don't know, like sometimes the tamales, right? The was the queso con rajas. Why are you getting double of that, but only a little scoop of salad, right? And it's just kind of like, oh my God, like I had to really work my plate around other people instead of myself. And when we find ourselves constantly doing things for, you know, other people instead of ourselves, that's really when I think we lose a lot of that unity with ourselves, spiritually and physically, right? And that disconnection just like leaves these gaps that are so hard to reconnect and really like fill, right? And then we're left with just a lot of like feelings of shame, guilt, and really not knowing what it is that we truly need.
Yeah, yeah. I think I don't know. Some people listening to this might be like, I'm hearing maybe there are no rules. It doesn't matter what I put on my plate, and then it's like that talk to like shifting away from this good versus bad food narrative.
Yes.
The moralization of food really comes from all of these external factors, all of the dieting that we're sold, all of the like colonization and demonization of our foods, from corn to rice to all these other things, that it's like we grew up living that, like surviving off of this, and now you're going to tell us it's a quote unquote bad carb or starch, and next thing you know some diet fad comes up and it's like the next superfood. And it's like, wow, way to go through a roller coaster of you're telling me I'm a bad person for this, to now like I have to pay 2 to 3 times the amount just to eat what my family survived off of. That's that's a crazy concept that I don't think I'm ever gonna get over.
No.
But
I think
uh-huh.
there's a lot of avenues where you can spiral, like, oh, the health piece or the medical evidence, or my doctor said this, or my Thea said this, and now I'm spiraling towards like not wanting to be ashamed in front of my family. And so it's, I think now the name of the game is let's catch that on and speak to ourselves with compassion and catch ourselves when we're starting to approach that the top of the roller coaster before it drops, and say, whoa, whoa, where is this coming from? Let's be gentle with ourselves. Let's understand maybe the origins of it. Because I feel like understanding the origins, whether it's because this came from a patriarchal society or because of the diet fads that are false, I feel like that sometimes can empower to be like calling it out and then protecting yourself and be like, I'm not going to follow that roller coaster ride. I'm going to sit and now enjoy it. And I think that's where the grounding skills can help too, to catch on before you spiral so deep that, yeah, you're in freeze mode and don't know what to do at the table.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad you brought up grounding, because I think it could be super helpful to put out those little nuggets for people and kind of try to model or explain what are different ways that we can share them to practice grounding themselves and be present and not miss the moment, because they're maybe stuck in a fight or flight mode, and all of a sudden the event happened and it's either a blur or something like a cassette that plays nonstop in the back of their head, trying to, like, for me a lot of times it was like analyzing frame by frame. Ooh, I did that, how could I have done this differently? But it's more of like, it happened, it is what it is, we're on to the next year.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I think like, and I think we share this in therapy, Veronica, but like grounding with food, the 5 4 3 2 1 method comes up so often, right?
Mm-hmm.
The like, how do we stop thinking about the food itself and think about the qualities, engaging our senses, really pausing to take in what we're about to nourish our body with. What are the smells that we're coming across, and the visuals, the colors, the mouth feel once you start eating. And this can sound kind of awkward to somebody if they've never done it before. Like, I'm gonna have to pause and think about all this, but if you're hearing this now, this is something you can practice at any time, before and beyond the holidays, because we can get very caught up in eating and not even realizing what we ate until after. And giving yourself that time to really take that food in a different way is also kind of like mentally nourishing yourself too. And
Mm-hmm.
that I find can sometimes resonate with people as a good strategy.
What I think of also is like practicing that pause, right? Practicing that pause, whether it's in those moments around like your family, or if it's in those moments where, you know, you're have had such a stressful day and you're just trying to get something in your system, but just practicing that pause and acknowledging, right, what it is that would feel good for you in that moment, right? What it is that you really, want or need, right? The other thing that, and I know Christina, this probably sounds familiar, is like I always encourage normalizing and adding, foods that we think are like bad or like we're save this for dessert. Like I really like practicing incorporating that onto like your plate of food because it's just food, right? It's just food. That cookie, it's food. That, cupcake, it's food. That pastry, that concha, like whatever, it's food, right? Put it on your plate. And I know a lot of people are kind of like, what do you mean put it on my plate? But I'm gonna want to eat it first. But it's like it's food, right? Your body needs the nourishment. Your body wants this nourishment. Allow yourself.
Yeah. Liberate yourself by having it there. If that's the first thing
Yes,
you eat, so be it, right?
yes, yes. Because
Meant
we've
desserts before main meals. So
yes, because we've normalized, oh, we can't have this just yet. Like we have to eat all these, and it's like, why? Like, why? Why do we got to do that? Like, why are we stopping ourselves, right? And then that's when we kind of feel like we're restricted. We can't eat this. Like, it feels like you're doing something bad when all you're doing is trying to nourish yourself or enjoy something, right? That maybe you don't get to have often.
Yeah, there is no one right way of eating your plate. If we're
Nope.
starting with the fun food, whatever, you'll get to the vegetable at some point if you want it. Who cares? It's all
yeah.
gonna digest and be utilized the same.
Exactly.
So I like what you said, Veronica, about like slow down. And I think the answer of what's the right way comes from within, like from yourself.
Yes.
Like today, this sounds right. Like let's do the cookies first. Or you know what, tomorrow maybe the sopita first, and then the next phase, because that's actually what I'm feeling. That's what I'm excited for. So it really has to come from within, and the way to know that without the noise of everything else, from the people around you, from the rules and the culture, is, I mean, those skills. If it's to take a deep breath, literally just taking a deep breath or two, and then being able to hear your own little inner voice being like, yeah, this is what I want, then that's the move. That's the way to go and do it. um, if it's something you're like, this has been exciting all the way up until I'm in the house with my family and now it's kind of gone because I'm distracted, all right, go back to that like initial feeling. But it'll come from within too. Removing the noise.
Hmm. I think part of removing the noise too is like if it's something that you have access to, like if somebody else is around that knows or that you've, shared experiences with on how difficult it is with family, like
Mm.
lean into that person as support. Maybe you're both going and making your plate together, and that way, like, you're just focusing on what each other is doing. And that alone is kind of like a little mirror to, "Ooh, somebody else is doing this too." At least within us, there are no rules, and whatever everyone else is saying is just a blur, and you still get to enjoy yourself. Um, but yeah, a lot of different things, a lot of ways to try to still be present again for the sake of you being able to have a good time to enjoy. And one holiday is not going to fix it all, but it's a great place to start practicing for yourself because eventually it feels a little less and less like work at the end. And then you can maybe feel like you can start to branch out and pull your family members in if that's what makes you feel comfortable.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm thinking, should we share a bit of some of the skills? Because I know like the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I don't know if everyone's aware of it, but that's like one of many. And I know these are all entailing calming down our nervous system and helping us be aware of the senses around us. Again, that grounding skill. So I don't know. We can definitely share that maybe when we post this too, if people are interested in other methods or methods that are quick on the go or methods that they want to practice before the meal, the main event. That would be good.
Yeah,
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 we
we
could
can definitely share those. Sorry, go ahead.
we could I was gonna say the same thing, Christina. You're fine. We could definitely link those in there. I think that would be really good, especially just to start building on some of y'all's toolkits, right? Because really, putting these things into practice, and I think also just remembering giving yourselves grace, right? It just because we try it once, it might not work. That's okay. But if we keep trying it, you can find these techniques actually very helpful. and starting to build up that toolkit.
Yeah, yeah, we can definitely have some links in the description of the episode. That way people can click and maybe they see a little quick diagram of 5 4 3 2 1 or little quick blurbs that describe any other strategies we want to share. So feel free to look for that if it feels helpful.
And I know we spoke a lot to in the moment at mealtime or even preparing, but I'm kind of thinking at the end, right? Like after the meals or when you go home, I think these skills are just as applicable and helpful too before the spiraling happens then too. Cause I know that's common too. I know I experienced that a lot was more post eating is all the thoughts, the negativity. So whether it is then focusing on the senses, if it's because the party's still going on, the celebration, there's music, there's dancing, whatever, hone in on that. Or if it's silence that you need, how do I stay in silence with peace, right? Not perfection.
Yeah, definitely. Well, any last minute thoughts, y'all?
I just hope everyone does enjoy the holidays, make the most of it, celebrate your, your roots, your culture. This is what it's about. This is the time of year to do it. So make the most of it.
Hmm. Definitely just kind of piggybacking off of Nico, right? Remember, there's a lot of joy in being with your family and unity. There's always going to be comments there, but I think remembering like what we have control over, right, is going to be the way that we react to it. And we could either, choose to let it take up our peace, or we could choose to try to reclaim, right, our joy in these celebratory moments and just remembering your why.
Yes. I think they said it perfectly. And I think with that, thank you guys for joining us again. We really hope today's conversation gave you some tools to help you feel a little more prepared to navigate the food and the family and potential boundary setting that comes with all of the complex feelings showing up. And, we're hopefully looking forward to you guys joining us next time for the part two, where we'll pick up the conversation. Then we'll dive into more of the familismo boundary setting body comments that come up during this time as well, and just navigating the pressures around weight and New Year's resolutions. And I would just say, like, don't forget you deserve to enjoy your traditions and take care of yourself at the same time. So if there's anything that came up for you while you were listening to us chat, please feel free to share any thoughts in the comments, or we now have our Instagram finally. You can head over there. We will include all of that information in the description so you can find us and you can reach out to us directly there too. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.